Hanol found herself thinking back to a time when she wanted to spend some quality time with Jae-hee. They had made plans, and Hanol was really looking forward to it. However, just when things were starting to get interesting, Jae-hee suddenly announced that he had to leave. He claimed he had forgotten about an important commitment, and it caught Hanol off guard. She couldn't help but feel a bit worried and confused about why he would just leave her so abruptly. After Jae-hee left, he returned home feeling a bit unsettled. Once he was at home, he started searching for a USB drive that contained some video material he needed for an assignment. But then he realized he wasn't sure which hard drive the USB was on. As he searched through his things, a memory struck him. He had lent the USB containing the important videos to Hanol. Jae-hee was puzzled. If he had given the USB to Hanol, then why did he still have it in his possession? He couldn't understand what Hanol had taken with her instead. Back in the present, Sung Hyun noticed that Hanol appeared to be feeling a bit uneasy. Concerned for her well-being, he asked if she was feeling cold. Despite his inquiry, Hanol insisted she was fine, trying to brush off any worries. However, Sung Hyun felt something was off and decided to address the topic of her relationship with Min-cheol. He mentioned that he was aware of how close she and Min-cheol were, finding it somewhat strange. Hanol quickly clarified that there was nothing more between them. They were simply childhood friends. Despite her explanation, Sung Hyun pressed for confirmation about her feelings, wanting to be sure that there were no romantic attachments involved. This question made Hanol feel a mix of emotions, as she began to wonder if he had forgotten what she had previously shared with him about her feelings. Sung Hyun suddenly realized that he had made a mistake by asking Hanol about their feelings for each other. He quickly apologized, and Hanol explained to him that they didn't have any romantic feelings for one another. If they had, she wouldn't be at the group date with everyone else. She then asked Sung Hyun why he was asking such strange questions. Sung Hyun replied that he was interested in her, which surprised Hanol a lot. However, Sung Hyun had anticipated this reaction since they had only just met. He then asked her if they could go out on a date sometime. While this conversation was happening, Min-cheol was nearby, hiding and listening in on their discussion. He looked a bit jealous as he watched them, clearly unhappy about Sung Hyun's interest in Hanol. The next day, Minji saw Min-cheol sitting alone and walked over to him. She wondered why he was by himself when he was supposed to be with Hanol. Feeling frustrated, Min-cheol told her that Hanol had gone out with her boyfriend. At first, Minji struggled to process this information. After a moment, she became upset, questioning why Hanol hadn't told her about having a boyfriend. As she thought about it, she realized that Hanol might have met someone during the group date they attended the previous day. Minji was quite surprised that Hanol had found a boyfriend so quickly. Min-cheol then explained to Minji that he had only discovered Hanol's relationship by accident, as it wasn't Hanol who had intentionally shared this news with him. This revelation made Minji ponder Hanol's behavior more deeply. As the day went on, she began to observe that Min-cheol's observation was accurate. Hanol was taking significantly longer to respond to her messages than she had in the past. Previously, Hanol had been quick to reply, but now her texts seemed to come with an unexpected delay. Min-cheol suggested that Hanol might just be busy and that it was understandable for her to take her time with responses, but this did little to ease Minji's growing concerns. Minji felt a mixture of worry and confusion, questioning whether Hanol was intentionally distancing herself or simply caught up in her new relationship. To distract himself from the situation, Min-cheol spotted the campus cat, Bong-sik, lounging nearby. With a smile breaking through his earlier frustration, he decided to play with the cat for a while. Minji began to think about Min-cheol's feelings and wondered if he was actually jealous of Hanol's new boyfriend. She decided to ask him directly whether he was okay with the situation. Min-cheol responded that he had no choice but to accept it, which prompted Minji to remember how he used to chase away guys who got too close to Hanol in the past. She felt a pang of sympathy for him, realizing how difficult it must be for him to see Hanol with someone else now that she had made her choice. However, Min-cheol quickly denied her accusation, insisting that he had only been protecting Hanol all along, not acting out of jealousy. Minji, sensing his reluctance to discuss his true feelings, then asked him to rate Hanol's new boyfriend, curious to know what he thought of the guy. Instead of giving her an answer, Min-cheol chose to accept the reality that Hanol had moved on with her life. He reflected on the past, remembering that Hanol had once held him responsible for her lack of friends, which added to his reluctance to interfere in her new relationship. Min-cheol realized that he couldn't chase the boyfriend away, as doing so would only strain their friendship further. After all, he reminded himself, Hanol was now an adult and capable of handling her own relationships. Despite Min-cheol's acceptance of Hanol's new relationship, he firmly maintained that if the boyfriend ever tried anything inappropriate with her, he would make him pay for it. This serious stance highlighted Min-cheol's protective nature, showing that, regardless of the situation, he still cared deeply about Hanol's well-being. Meanwhile, Hanol was at Sung Hyun's house, expressing her gratitude for his invitation. As they settled in, Sung Hyun asked her what she would like to drink, offering her a choice between soda and water. Hanol opted for soda, feeling comfortable in his presence. While they chatted, Hanul began to reflect on their interactions outside. She considered their time together to be more like flirting than an actual date. For her, it felt like they were simply getting to know each other rather than officially dating. Since Hanul had never been in a relationship before, she wasn't sure what dating truly entailed. This uncertainty led her to view their approach as a sensible way to build a connection. As she observed Sung Hyan, she couldn't help but feel that he seemed like a genuinely good person. However, Hanul felt a bit awkward because she had only applied lipstick for her date, and Minji wasn't around to help her with her makeup routine. Despite her initial discomfort, she tried to push it aside and focus on the moment. As she took a sip of her soda, Sung Hyan suggested they get started on their assignment once she finished drinking, to which she agreed. After she opened her laptop, Sung Hyan leaned over to take a look at the assignment. He asked her if it was a major one, and Hanul replied that it indeed was. She explained that the assignment required her to watch classical masterpieces and analyze the emotions conveyed in them. Hanul felt a wave of apprehension as she admitted that she wasn't particularly confident in her speaking skills. This lack of confidence led her to predict a poor grade before she even started. Seeing her worry, Sung Hyan offered to sit down with her while she watched the videos, suggesting that his own interpretations might help her understand the material better. Sung Hyan settled down beside Hanul, but she couldn't help but feel a bit awkward as he sat closer to her than she had anticipated. The proximity made her unsure of how to act. She wondered if she should rub shoulders with him or maintain some space. After a moment of internal debate, she relaxed a little and decided to just be herself around him. Determined to focus on their assignment, Hanul opened a video for them to watch together so they could analyze it. However, she was taken aback when the video turned out to be something completely unexpected and rather bizarre. The strange content shocked Hanul, and she hadn't anticipated seeing anything like that in her assignment. Feeling embarrassed and overwhelmed, she quickly closed the laptop and rested her head on it in shame, wishing she could disappear. She felt a mix of discomfort and self-consciousness as she processed what had just happened. However, Sung Hyan reassured her, telling her not to worry about it. He comforted her by explaining that it was normal for such things to happen, trying to ease her embarrassment. Hanul spent a few moments trying to figure out what had gone wrong. She considered the possibility that she had picked the wrong USB drive. In her rush to leave, she hadn't checked it properly, so she decided to try watching another video. To her dismay, it turned out to be just as bizarre as the first one. Feeling frustrated, she began to reason through the whole situation, wondering why strange things seemed to happen whenever she was around guys. It was a puzzling thought that left her feeling slightly self-conscious. As she was lost in her thoughts, Hanul suddenly realized how close Sung Hyan was sitting next to her. She couldn't help but wonder when they had gotten that close. Just as she was processing her feelings, Sung Hyan leaned in, attempting to kiss her. Hanul instinctively stopped him, gently letting him know that it couldn't happen. Sung Hyan seemed surprised, thinking that was what she wanted all along. However, Hanul quickly clarified that they hadn't known each other well enough to start kissing. Hanul noticed a change in Sung Hyan's demeanor, sensing that he might think of her as cheap or easy. The thought made her uncomfortable, prompting her to stand up and prepare to leave before things could escalate further. She didn't want him to misunderstand her intentions or feel like she was someone who would easily give in. As she approached the door, Sung Hyan called out to her, trying to get her attention, but she didn't respond. Determined to make her exit, she continued outside. However, he managed to catch up with her and gently grabbed her hands, pulling her to a stop. He began to explain that kissing was a natural part of dating, a way for couples to see if they were compatible. He suggested that she might not be aware of this, given that it was her first time being in a situation like this. Despite his earnest words and the sweetness of his tone, Hanul remained unmoved. While Hanul and Sung Hyan were still discussing their feelings and the unexpected tension in the air, Hanul spotted Jae-hee passing by. Feeling relieved to see a familiar face, she decided to call out to him. Jae-hee stopped in his tracks and greeted her with a warm smile. This was Jae-hee's first time seeing Hanul outside of campus, and he was taken aback by the sight of her holding hands with Sung Hyan. The image felt unusual to him, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of surprise mixed with curiosity about their relationship. Sung Hyan, noticing Jae-hee's expression, confidently declared that he was having a conversation with his girlfriend, suggesting that Jae-hee should leave them alone. This statement caught Hanul off guard, as she had not agreed to that label. She instinctively tried to yank her hand away from Sung Hyan, but his grip was surprisingly firm, preventing her from pulling free. Turning to face Hanul, Sung Hyan looked her in the eye and insisted that they had become an official couple since the previous day. Hanul was taken aback by the sudden shift in Sung Hyan's demeanor, realizing that he seemed to be threatening her rather than expressing genuine affection. His confident facade now felt more like intimidation, and she couldn't help but feel uncomfortable under his grip. Jae-hee, noticing the escalating tension, quickly intervened. He stepped forward and separated them with a swift hand chop, asserting his presence and drawing attention to the situation. Although he didn't know Sung Hyun well, something about his behavior raised alarms for Jae-hee. He firmly stated that it wasn't right to hold a friend like that and turned to Hanul, asking her if she was genuinely dating Sung Hyun. Hanul, still reeling from the situation, shook her head and gestured dismissively, responding with a simple no. The rejection hung in the air, and she hoped it would clarify the misunderstanding. However, Sung Hyun was unwilling to back down. He insisted that he needed to talk to her about something important in private, his tone making it clear that he felt entitled to her attention. Jae-hee, however, stood his ground. He pointed out that it wasn't late and that many students from their school lived nearby, warning that they could easily start spreading rumors if they saw them together in such a compromising situation. Seeing that Sung Hyun was not prepared to back down, Jae-hee quickly thought on his feet. He called out to Sung Hyun, distracting him by pointing toward a group of students nearby. This brief diversion gave him the opportunity to grab Anul's hand and pull her away, leading her to safety. By the time Sung Hyun turned back around, he realized he had been outsmarted. Hanul and Jae-hee had already dashed away, leaving him feeling frustrated and confused. Once they had put some distance between themselves and Sung Hyun, Hanul found herself panting heavily. She didn't have much stamina compared to Jae-hee, who seemed to be more athletic. Jae-hee noticed her struggle and apologized for making her sprint so hard, showing concern for her well-being. He reached out to pat her back gently, wanting to offer some comfort and reassurance. However, as he did so, Hanul became increasingly aware of Jae-hee's strong cologne, which seemed to envelop her. The scent, while initially pleasant, soon became overwhelming, causing her head to spin. Despite Jae-hee's good intentions, the combination of running and the fragrance made her feel nauseous. In a sudden wave of dizziness, she couldn't hold back any longer and vomited on his shirt, leaving both of them in a state of shock. After the unexpected incident, Jae-hee and Hanul headed over to the laundromat, the atmosphere thick with a mix of embarrassment and awkwardness. Hanul couldn't shake off her mortification at having vomited on her upperclassman's shirt. The thought of having caused such a mess weighed heavily on her mind as they walked, and she felt the heat rise in her cheeks. Once they arrived, she turned to Jae-hee, repeatedly apologizing for what had happened. To her surprise, Jae-hee brushed off her apologies, assuring her that it was okay and that he didn't mind at all. He could see she was flustered, so he kindly asked if she was feeling any better now. Hanul, however, couldn't help but notice that Jae-hee was standing there without his shirt, having taken it off to prevent any further mess. This added to her embarrassment and made her heart race. She tried to focus on his words, but her mind wandered, filled with perverted thoughts about her seemingly angelic sunbae. In that moment, she felt ridiculous, deeming herself to be unrecyclable trash for having such thoughts about him. Jae-hee, completely oblivious to her internal turmoil, continued explaining that he didn't mind the wait, reassuring her that it would only take about an hour and a half to wash his shirt. As Hanul sat there, she couldn't help but be mesmerized by Jae-hee's carefree demeanor, his relaxed attitude making the atmosphere lighter despite the earlier chaos. However, guilt quickly washed over her for the incident. She felt compelled to make amends, claiming that she should pay for his laundry and the psychological damage she had caused. In a fit of sincerity, she knelt down in front of him, her expression earnest and somewhat comical. Jae-hee, flustered by her unexpected gesture, quickly reassured her that there was no need for any of that. He found her earnestness charming, but also a bit overwhelming. Despite his attempts to dismiss her concerns, Hanul kept apologizing, insisting that she could help him with his laundry, do his chores, and even assist with his assignments. The thought of it all made her feel a little better, but she still felt the need to offer more. When she proposed the idea of writing wishes and placing them in a jar as part of her compensation, Jae-hee raised an eyebrow, intrigued. He encouraged her to write a wish for him, but she insisted that one wish was far too low for the trouble she had caused. Determined to make things right, she declared that she would give him at least 3 wishes. He couldn't help but chuckle at her enthusiasm, realizing he had no choice but to agree to her terms. With a playful smile, he pointed out that since she had such a heavy bag and he had forced her to sprint, it was really his fault this time. He wanted her to know that she shouldn't feel so bad about the situation. Hanul rummaged through her bag and suddenly remembered she had an oversized jacket belonging to Mincheol. She figured it would fit Jae perfectly and decided to offer it to him. Just as she was about to pull it out, the USB she had been using slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor, clattering against the surface. A wave of embarrassment washed over her as she cursed her clumsiness, feeling even worse about the timing. To her surprise, Jae didn't seem bothered at all. He chuckled lightly, acknowledging the incident with a laid-back attitude, which helped Hanul feel a bit more at ease despite her embarrassment. Once Jae slipped into the jacket, he grinned widely, commenting on how perfectly it fit him. Hanul couldn't help but smile, admiring how good he looked. However, the USB that had fallen reminded her of the awkwardness she felt about its contents. She hesitated, knowing she needed to explain herself. When she finally spoke, she admitted that the USB contained a weird movie she had watched as a child, which had always inspired her to pursue her dreams. Jae's curiosity about the movie's impact on Hanul only grew stronger. Despite her initial reluctance to share, knowing how embarrassing it felt, he playfully invoked the wish coupon, reminding her of their agreement. With a resigned sigh, Hanul realized she had no choice but to spill the details. As she began to speak, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She had learned the hard way that sometimes words could have unexpected consequences, and that even someone she viewed as an angel could surprise her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Hesitating for a moment, she finally confessed her dream. She had always wanted to kiss the person she fell in love with in the future. Jae was surprised when he heard that. Minchiak arrived home to find his mother already upset, her frustration apparent as she scolded him for not spending the weekend as expected. She had anticipated his arrival after 3 weeks of absence, and the disappointment built up. His mother had explicitly asked him to come home every weekend, feeling neglected by his long absences. To her, his sporadic visits meant he was distancing himself from the family. Minchiak, however, felt overwhelmed by the constant pressure. He believed his mother's insistence on frequent visits was less about spending time together and more about having him around to help with chores. Minchiol was living in his grandmother's empty house near his campus. He thought it was a good idea because he could stay there for free. His mother didn't think there was anything wrong with it. To her, it seemed normal since he was just trying to save money while studying. However, Minchiol felt uncomfortable. He believed that moving into his grandmother's house should be more meaningful, and he wished his mother would understand his feelings. One day, his mother told him she had some snacks and kimchi for him to take back when he left. She suggested he give some to his friend Hanul. Minchiol quickly replied that Hanul didn't need kimchi anymore. His mother was surprised by his response and didn't want to prepare anything else instead. She then asked if Hanul would like some braised pork and soy sauce, hoping that might work. Minchiol felt frustrated. All he wanted was for his mother to understand how he felt about the situation. In a moment of anger, he snapped at her, asking her to just make something for her own daughter instead of worrying about Hanul. While Minchiol and his mother were having their conversation, Hanul's mother walked in. Minchiol greeted her with a bow, and she returned the greeting warmly. Even though she was shorter than him, she reached up to pat his head, so he had to bow down a little to let her do it. Hanul's mother brought some alcohol and snacks with her. She asked Minchiol if he wanted to drink with them, but he politely declined, saying he would be leaving soon. His mother, surprised by his quick departure, questioned why he didn't want to spend more time with Hanul's mother, especially since he had just arrived. Feeling pressured, Minchiol quickly made up an excuse. He said he had been very busy lately and didn't have time to stay. After their conversation, Minchiol's mother handed him a bag of snacks to take to Hanul at school. When he picked it up, he was surprised by how heavy it felt, but he felt he had to accept it, especially with Hanul's mother there. He didn't want to seem rude or ungrateful. Hanul's mother, seeing them together, looked pleased and said how happy she was that Minchiol and Hanul had each other. She then asked him to promise to take care of Hanul, expressing how much it meant to her. Minchiol nodded and assured her he would help. He already knew Hanul well and understood her personality, so he felt a sense of responsibility to look out for her. He headed out with 2 bags of snacks, one for Hanul and one for himself. He couldn't help but feel a little regret that his mother had given him those snacks to pass on to her. After all, he had no idea when he would even get a chance to see Hanul. He imagined she might be with her boyfriend right now, so he figured he would probably have to wait until the next day to give them to her. Since he had a shift the following day, he thought about bringing the snacks with him to campus, just in case. But then he reconsidered. Why make things more complicated for her? It seemed better to just wait for her to come and get them herself, instead of trying to arrange something that could be a hassle. Hanul was recounting the scene between her and Sung Hyen, specifically about the kiss, to Jae-hee. As she spoke, Jae-hee found it hard not to laugh, even before Hanul finished. Her facial expressions alone made it clear that she found the whole thing amusing. Hanul felt a little embarrassed, especially since she hadn't wanted to tell Jae-hee at first. She knew he would probably laugh at her, and she wasn't wrong. But Jae-hee reassured her, saying it wasn't like that. He explained that the way she described the situation just made it sound like something out of middle school, which is why he found it so funny. However, Jae-hee told Hanul that the guy who would be getting her first kiss should feel honored, given how seriously she took these things. Hanul, on the other hand, hadn't expected Jae-hee to react like this, laughing so wildly at her. She was a bit surprised, but Jae-hee explained that it wasn't because he was making fun of her. He said it had just been a long time since he'd had such a good laugh. As they continued talking, Jae-hee suddenly remembered that what Hanul was describing had happened in the dormitory. He realized something interesting. While others might have made her uncomfortable with such a story, Hanul seemed completely unaffected by sharing this with him. It made him notice how at ease she felt around him, unlike how she might act with other people. After a while, Jae-hee was about to leave and did something with Hanul's jacket, telling her that he would take it home to clean it up. Hanul insisted that he shouldn't bother, saying it wasn't a big deal, but he didn't agree. Instead of giving in, he decided to ask for Hanul's contact information. Hanul, however, thought it wasn't necessary and mentioned that they could just message each other on KakaoTalk. But he explained that having her phone number would make things easier, especially when it came to returning the jacket after he had cleaned it. Calling, he said, would be much more convenient for arranging the handover. Hanul felt a wave of happiness as she finally exchanged contacts with Jae-hee. It was a small thing, but it made her day feel special. Just before he left, Jae-hee leaned in and whispered something in her ear. The sudden closeness startled Hanul, and she felt a strange flutter in her stomach. It was a surprising way to end her day, leaving her feeling a bit giddy. Once Jae-hee was gone, Hanul was left alone to consider what she could eat. She realized she had already messed up her dinner and, to make matters worse, had thrown up all her lunch earlier. Now, with restaurants and convenience stores closed, she started to wonder where she could find something to eat. Just then, Hanul received a notification on her phone indicating she had an unread message. She felt a surge of excitement when she saw that it was from Mincheol, saying he had something to give her. Without wasting any time, she hurried over to Mincheol's house. When she arrived, Hanul was taken aback to find Mincheol wearing only his underwear. Her eyes widened in surprise as he casually explained that he had just gotten out of the shower and hadn't realized she would come by at that time. Since Mincheol realized that Hanul had come for the food he wanted to give her, he told her to sit down while he went to get dressed. Hanul couldn't find a reason to argue with him, so she simply went over to the couch and waited patiently for him to finish. Once he was dressed, Mincheol handed her the snacks and mentioned that her mother had actually packed her favorite banchan. Hanul's face lit up with joy as she accepted the food. She couldn't help but express how tough her day had been, explaining that she had felt incredibly hungry after everything that had happened. Coming over to Mincheol's house felt like a reward for her. Hanul emptied the contents of the bag and was delighted to see that it was filled with her favorite banchan. However, she was surprised when she spotted a bottle of alcohol nestled among the snacks. Confused, she thought that her mother must have mistakenly included the wrong bag in the one she brought. Mincheol then realized why the bag had felt so heavy and suggested that they should return the alcohol since it was meant for Hanul's mother. But Hanul disagreed, saying she could just text her mom about it later. Instead, she proposed that they should drink it together. Mincheol, feeling adventurous and also a bit hungry, agreed. He suggested they make bibimbap together to go along with the drinks. Hanul loved the idea, and soon they were both in the kitchen, preparing the ingredients for the bibimbap. Hanul is seen as making a weird face due to the fact that the alcohol is bitter, to which she asked about the alcohol's percentage. Which Mincheol tried to check guess that it should be about 20% or so, but when they looked at the bottle they were both shocked when they realized that it's actually 40% instead. So, she suggests that they should mix it with something else, as she cannot handle that much, as she walked towards the fridge to get some soda, which they mixed, and then tried it out and found out that it's not bad. Meanwhile, Hanul asked Mincheol if she could borrow a pair of his pajamas. She explained that her belt was uncomfortable and that wearing some of his stretchy pants would make it easier for her to eat comfortably. Eventually, she ended up wearing his oversized clothes, which made her feel a little silly. Mincheol couldn't help but tease her, joking about how she looked small in his giant clothes. Hanul quickly retorted that she was taller than the average height for women in Korea, insisting that he was the one who looked like a giant. They both laughed, enjoying the playful banter. As they settled in, Mincheol mentioned that he had made some snacks, which pleased Hanul. She wanted to come over and grab some, but as she moved, she realized that the pants were almost slipping off her hips, so she had to be careful. Shortly after, they were seen as they were getting drunk from the whiskey that they began to act funny. Meanwhile, he asked her if she was not going to text her boyfriend, to which she replied that she had really wished she had won. He then asked her that she must have got asked out in the bar last night, to which she replied that she was not. That Mincheol began to smirk. She noticed him, to which she remarked that he is quite annoying, to which they began to mock each other as to how they were being addressed in middle school, as she is known as a tomboy, then while Mincheol is known as a ladyboy as well. As they kept bickering, they eventually got closer, to which Mincheol gave her a short kiss on the lips and then stared at each other before giving her a long kiss. They were both thinking as to how they ended up kissing each other, as that had not been part of what they had thought initially. Even though she had been wishing of having a kiss with her lover, she still found the feeling even more than what she had imagined. Later on, Mincheol is seen having a nosebleed for having a closer look at Hanul's body, to which she also touched his abs, as that had been her desire for a while. She was surprised when she found it to be soft on touch, to which he told her that if he had tense up then it would become hard. He then stopped her from groping him, to which he also wanted to touch her as well.